Today I'd like to share with you some ideas surrounding the residential real estate market and what happens when a natural disaster strikes. In addition to the horrific loss of life, in which we lost in this most recent storm over 120 people, the total amount of loss of physical possessions, according to Bloomberg, is in excess of $70 billion. As you can imagine, there's an immediate displacement of a lot of homeowners. We find that the most displaced homeowners are those who live in the most affordable housing. In this case, that means people in temporary housing or in trailers or in homes that were built prior to the new hurricane construction laws. Like most other situations of supply and demand, when we immediately remove a whole bunch of the supply of housing stock, the prices go up because there's less of it available. Right now, we still have over 1,000 people living in temporary housing. That's the kind of temporary facilities that we set up in stadiums and in homeless shelters and temporary makeshift facilities where people who have no other place to go can stay. The second thing that we see happen, because a lot of rental units are also taken out of the market, is the rents in these areas immediately go up. Unfortunately, many of the people in the exact strike zone of the hurricane are going to be permanently relocating into areas where they can afford housing. Now, prior to the hurricane hitting us, the Florida Housing Commission described the shortage of housing stock as in excess of 500,000 units in the state of Florida. The state has had an increase in population of over 60% since 1992. This is a really difficult combination with growth and people wanting to be there and the housing inventory shrinking at the same time. So let's take a look at what happens in the near term. The number of listings available in the market drops, obviously. People need to take their homes off of the market in order to put them back into the condition where they can be habitable again. Often people say, well, it's a great time to go in and buy something cheap. What we find is exactly the opposite. People hang on to those properties because they're not willing to just wash their hands of these places that they've invested their lives, their time, their love, and their money. Florida's disaster is a little bit different from some of the others that we've found. It has waterfront, and waterfront is always going to be desirable. Unlike earthquakes that might happen in the center of a continent or a fire that happens in the mountains somewhere that causes great decimation, something in the area, in a highly desirable waterfront area, is going to have a regrowth at probably higher prices than we have ever seen before. While we're experiencing really horrible conditions in Southwest Florida at the moment, long term, it's going to continue to be a very desirable area, and I expect that in this next 2 to 3 years, as it gets built back together, it's going to become even more desirable than it ever was. That's what we have for you today regarding what happens when a disaster strikes. We're going to see a temporary lull in the number of transactions happening because listings simply are not available. We're going to find an extended period of time to rebuild. We're going to find a loss of affordable housing stock, causing some people to relocate. But long term, because of the extraordinary natural features that we have in Southwest Florida, I'm optimistic for a revitalization to make it even greater than it was prior to Hurricane Ian.